church and bring them back to us as well, I'm sure. All right. We're going to continue this morning in our series on doing life together. And a subcategory of it, Randy's going to make me flip my own slides. All right, Randy, thank you. Let's see if it's going to work. There you go. I got the last verse of the song. There, nope, still on the song. Get me back to my sermon. Luke, the 7th chapter. Follow along with this morning. I've entitled this morning's passage, or this morning's sermon, Party On. Now, I was so blessed to come into the sanctuary right after some prayer time in Mitch's class this morning. And when I arrived, my dear brother here has got his Bible out. I thought, I'm going to go over and say hello to him. But not until he's through reading the Bible. He's concentrating, meditating on things of the Lord. But as soon as he put his Bible down, I said, what were you reading? He says, your passage. He says, I was reading your sermon. He says, but I'm a little confused. He says, the title is Party On. And it doesn't really seem like that's what's going on in that text. I said, I'll connect the dots for you. Thank you for pointing that out to me. We'll connect those dots. But let me ask you, how are you guys doing in your block maps? We have learned, have you learned any new pieces in that block map? Flip it for me there, Brandy. Okay, there you go. You remember we passed out, and we've been showing this each week on who is your neighbor. What if God really meant what he said? What if Jesus, the smartest person ever, was asked the question, what is the most important thing ever? And he says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor. What if the smartest guy ever summed up the best thing in the world to do, and that was to love your neighbor? Ask yourself to love God. If you have a relationship with God, then to have a relationship with your neighbor. And so I'm challenging you, and we have this book out, The Art of Neighboring. Many of you, a dozen or better of you now have that book. The ladies' ministry, I understand, is going to start that on Tuesday afternoon ladies' meeting. They'll do a group there with that. But what if he really meant what he said, and that is to love your neighbor? So we've been talking about getting to know your neighbor. Less than 10% of you could raise your hand that you knew all 8 of your closest neighbors. The 8 closest people that lived to you, you couldn't name all of those households. First name and last name, less than 10%. Less than 3% could say that they knew each of those and knew something about it. Maybe where they worked or what they did for a living. Something about their lives. Less than 1% of you that could name them, knew, had a relationship, felt like you could call them up and ask them to come over and help you with a project, or if they saw you out on the sidewalk, could call you in and ask you to help. What if, we're setting the bar pretty low here, but have any of you met any more of your neighbors? I met a dog neighbor yesterday. I came home and Elaine, my next door neighbor to the right, she and her husband's been writing manuals for NSA. You know what that stands for, right? No such agency. She was over there leaning over a new rail that they had put on her porch. And from the outside, she's leaning over. So I thought, man, I got to get over there. I don't know if she looks like she's going to pass out or what. She and her husband are retirees. Their oldest daughter and son-in-law and granddaughter has moved in with them recently and all, and I've got to go check on Elaine. She says, no, she says, I'm fine. She says, but when they put this new rail in, they put it in to where I have to come off the porch, go all the way down into the flower bed to turn the water on. And she's been watering her yard. But that gave me the opportunity, and I think John walked out right about that time. That gave me the opportunity to share with them that we had a new young couple, newlywed couple, living with us, and they have a dog. And I was like, oh, well, my dog wants to meet their dog. So she wanted to exercise the art of neighboring with the dogs even. We've been talking a lot, and I was just amazed this morning because January, the first service in January, we decided to start this Let's Do Life together. No, let's just not read the Word, not study Scriptures. Let's just do life together, which of course the Scriptures are the pinnacle. The Scriptures are the foundation of how we do life. And it's neat, as many of you going through experiencing God with the young adult group and all, have come into understand the Word of God said, and my life is, I need to step in line with the Word of God. Let's do the Word of God. Not let's just read it, not just study, but do the Word of God together. And I thought, when the Lord gave me that theme to begin with, my daughter says, Dad, this is the longest series you've ever been on. Usually, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 or something. Maybe if you're going through Genesis, you stay a little bit longer there. This is the longest one. And I was amazed this morning, praying and thinking and talking about this in my own mind and in here, literally kneeling at this altar and laying down here at about 4 a.m. Just think, Lord, it is amazing how really it's not laziness on my part to not change the title of the series, but how you've actually linked all of this into how we're doing life together. And I listened to a sermon by David Platt earlier too, and I thought, he had a little something there about corporate worship. Corporate worship is different than individual worship. When you go into your closet at home, man, you can get whatever way you want to get, right? Woo-hoo! Hallelujah! Praise God! Or just so reverently, just quietly, or just possibly even shedding tears. Shedding tears for what's going on in your life. But corporate worship, I heard somebody say, now, when you come in here, you just block everybody else out. You just pretend they're not even there. And you just, well, how do you think that would make them feel? He doesn't even care that I'm here. No, in corporate worship, it's different. You don't just concern yourself with your own concerns. People say, well, we want more hymns. Others say, we want more praise songs. Old people should be saying, hey, crank up the music a little bit. The young people like it that way. The young people should, you might keep it a little bit quieter during the hymns today. We don't want to offend. Corporate worship is about everybody. Corporate worship is about facilitating the needs. And, man, I want a Don Francisco kick. Now, for those of you who are, less than 50 years old or so, you might not even know who he is, or you may think he's that television host down in South America somewhere. But Don Francisco, in the maybe late 60s, all through the 70s for sure, and some in the 80s, was just a ballader, a Christian ballader singer. He just sang stories. He could make them up like JJ did up here during VBS this week. Now we're going to sit down. If you're not sitting down, it just started a story and had all the kids just, how does he know what we're going to do next? He's actually telling them, I'm on a Don Francisco, but I wouldn't necessarily oppose Don Francisco on all of you. That's for my individual worship. But corporate worship, you should be concerned with what is it? What's going to trigger somebody? JJ talked about, I came to Christ. 17, before that, I was dead in my sin. And something, and that I would say that first year of new birth, the songs that your church sang, the different is what takes you right back to that point in your life where you just, I surrender all. I give it all up. I'm yours. Sonny used to always say, 100%, Pastor, 100%, 100%. I'm all in. I'm 100% here. And music, many times say, so corporate, don't complain about what may. Now see, if we think of one another and we prefer one another, then we'll hear things like, oh, crank it up for the young people. Oh, keep it low for the older people so it won't offend them. And I'll get to choose. Keep it blended so everybody can have something that brings them, ushers them into the presence of the Almighty in their way, in a way that just speaks to their heart and says, God is awesome. God is great. We want to worship Him. We want to adore Him. We want to bring everything that we are. Block maps. What if Jesus meant what He said and He really wanted you to love? Now, it's hard to love someone that you don't even know their name. Dan the man. I heard about you when I was down in the basement pounding nails. And so, Dan the man. So I had to go up. I want to find you guys are already gone. I think going on the walk probably with the new dog. But when he came back, Dan kind of looked at me. How did you know my name? Oh, your reputation preceded you. No. They told me. I wanted to come up. I wanted to shake your hand. I wanted to know your name. I wanted to get to know you. Are you leaving today? And then we'll pop your tires or something, keep you an extra day. Get to know you, because it's fun. Block map. One of the things we need to do, the block maps just sets the bar so very, very low, but I want you to concentrate. I want you to intentionally step over that bar this week. Get to know another neighbor just within the first 8. and get to know something about moving them from stranger to acquaintance. It is tough, you know. We drive in with air conditioning inside, it's hot outside. There's that garage door that comes up that we can, you know, sometimes we don't move with our neighbors because we're afraid, or we're prejudiced, or we just don't have time. I want to tell you that Monday, first day of VBS, I came to VBS and I was excited. I was in game on, in the spirit of this thing and all, you know. And afterwards, after the first day, it was a wonderful day. My wife was feeling good, and I said, "Why don't we just go to dinner now?" And she took a look at me and said, "I really don't want to go to dinner with you looking like that." I said, "What's wrong with the way I look?" That's not too bad, is it? Unless, of course, you add this to it. And with that, some green neon shoes. So my wife agreed to go to dinner with me, which I was real pleased. She did ask the hostess, "Would you seat us in a dark corner?" She says, "Why? He'll light it up as soon as you sit down there." So, of course, then, by the time we went home from dinner, I was thinking, "Oh, man, make sure that garage door's open. I'm going to run in and get that garage door shut. I don't want any of my neighbors to see me looking like this. They'll think that preacher, what kind of crazy things are they doing over there at his church?" Because most of them know that I'm a minister. Well, you know, what kind of crazy things are we doing over here at this church? And why would I be embarrassed about it? They would run like that. But you know, I don't know many people other than preachers these days that put on a jacket when it's over 90 degrees outside. And of course, Jerry would tell me I wear the jacket so that I can crank the cool down so low that you guys are all freezing. So I'm going to join you. I am going to leave the noose on today, but not too many people put nooses around their necks anymore, do they? Sometimes we think our neighbors are going to think we're crazy, but really they just don't think about us much at all because they don't know us. Something wrong with this? Not as bad as the green. You remember the passage in Acts, the 17th chapter? Put that right there for me, Randy, if you will. Acts 17, read along with me. From one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he determined the times set for them and the exact place where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. What if God, the smartest man ever, Jesus, summed up the best way to live in just two forms? And that's love the Lord thy God with all that is within you, everything, and love your neighbor as yourself. And what if you were willing to do one, but unwilling to do the other? Then you're only half-hearted. You're only halfway in this thing. What if he meant what he said? What? So I want you to accept the challenge. God ordained beforehand who you would live next to and when you would live there. I often think, now I'd love to have lived in the days of Paul, ran around with him. But then I got to thinking about that the other day. I might have been one of the ones when they were looking for him, they took me instead and stoned me. Paul had his own stonings and had his own beatings and had his own snake bites and all that. But sometimes people that were associated with Paul, what if God foreordained when you would live, where you would live, and all you got to do is live for God? Now, and what if he did it for the purpose that some men might call upon him and find him, because he's not far, the scripture says, from any of us? What if Christians were associated? This is the next step. This is the next level after getting to know your neighbors, moving from stranger to acquaintance. What if Christians were noted for the best parties in their neighborhood? Block parties, Now, Becky and I had a blessing to have an invitation this week to go to a block party yesterday. Now, we loaned them, I think, about 10 tables here at the church and all of the chairs that were going to be used. But our custodians, friends of ours who we've known for probably close to a decade, been at the hospital when their children were born, people that clean this church here and are associated with our prior church as well, they invited us to the dual birthday party of their two youngest. And so we went over there yesterday. And I will tell you this, that it was quite a party. It had piñatas, it had all kinds of neat things there to do. Everyone there, well, let's put it this way. Becky and I were the only ones there that exclusively spoke English. You know what you call a person that only speaks one language? American. American. All the other nations. And many of them spoke some English, but it was not their first language. But I'm going to tell you, every one of these people, as we were introduced to them by the host, come over and hugged our neck, welcomed us to that party. And it was a wonderful party. The kids they would have made it in VBS. They sat down, they were quiet, they were so very respectful. And there's piñatas, there's all kinds of things. And nobody's begging to get over there and start opening the gift. They're eating with their parents. They're quiet, respectful.
Praise the Lord.
But what if Christians... What was that, John?
I think you got to praise the Lord back here.
Praise the Lord. Amen. It was a neat experience for us. It really was. What if Christians were associated with the very best of parties? Well, to connect that dot. When Jesus, during his time, the New Testament time, he went to some of the very best parties. In Matthew 9, beginning in verse 9, clue that one up there for me. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at a tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him. And Matthew got up and followed Jesus. And what's the very next verse said? While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, "Follow me to your house." Jesus basically invited himself over to Matthew's house. "Follow me," Christ says. "Let's go to your house for dinner." And it's not the first place, nor the last place that you will find this in Scripture. He invited himself over for dinner. If we're going to be serious about following Jesus, we should ask the question, when was the last time that you went to a party that religious people would be very uncomfortable with who you hung out with? Let's follow this same story, the next part of Matthew 9 here. Many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. Wow, it's not just one, but there's a lot of them. They're all over the place. These sinners are all around us. When the Pharisees saw that, they asked the disciple, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not for the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick.
Amen.
But go and learn what I mean." He is telling these teachers of the law, these experts in the Scripture, who says of them that they study the Scriptures night and day. It also says, but they fail to see the ones that the Scriptures reveal, the one who the Scripture teaches about. He says, go and learn this. I desire mercy. I desire kindness. I desire the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, long-suffering, goodness, gentleness, meekness, faith, temperance, more than bringing a gift to the party. More than offering a sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Now, why do I say that why did I say party on? Because Jesus went to party. In the 11th chapter of Matthew, we find that John the Baptist was being accused of being a prude. Probably wouldn't even come to parties, or if he did, he's not going to take off his stinky old camel hair jacket and that belt. He's only going to eat bugs over in a corner, wild locusts and honey. But Jesus, he's a glutton and a party-hardy type of guy. Because Jesus wanted to get out where the people were. What if Christians were associated with some of the very best parties. Are you with me now in Luke 7? Hopefully. You've had plenty of time to get there. Luke 7, beginning in the 37th verse. I think what we'll do first is just read it all the way through, and then we'll dissect it a little bit this morning. Starting in the 36th verse, when one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to dinner with him, he went. Did you get that? I turned down a lot of invitations. I confess, I turned down a lot of invitations. Now, most of you know I wear hearing aids. I'm hearing impaired. And a lot of times, I know that I'm going to hear everything, but I'm not going to hear anything specific. It's not that with hearing aids that you don't hear, that you hear everything. But it's just a big roar a lot of times. And, it's just too hard to be in crowds. It's not worth time. I just smile and nod my head, similar to the way the person that doesn't understand English does in a party. Just agree. Later you find out that you were volunteered to be the chairman of the next party or something. And you said yes. Sometimes you think, oh, it's just not worth it. But no, it is. Jesus was invited by the Pharisee to dinner, and he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came, and there with. Did you get it? I don't know if she was invited to the party. Sounds like she might have been a party crasher. But she came, and she brought with her something for Jesus, didn't she? She brought with her, where am I? Speak up. Remember, I'm hearing impaired.
37.
37, thank you. She learned that Jesus was going to be there eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. And she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw this, he said, turn me down just a little bit, I'm getting a lot of reverb here, said to himself, when the Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw this, he said to himself. Now how do you say to yourself? Usually you're just thinking it, aren't you? Yeah, you're just saying it in your own mind. You're thinking this not necessarily out loud. When the Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. Jesus answered. Wait a minute now. The Pharisee said to himself, and Jesus answered him, Simon, I have something to tell you. Tell me, teacher. Two people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now which of them will love him more? I suppose the one with the bigger debt forgiven. You judge correctly. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon. He turned towards the woman and said, Simon, do you see this woman? Do you even see this woman? I came into your house, and you did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has been shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little. Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. The other guests began to say among themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Before we go to the next slide, just draw your attention there to verse 44. Simon, do you see this woman? Now, before he asks that question, he preaches a sermon, didn't he? Hey, let me tell you about two guys. Both of them are great debts. Both of them can't pay. Both of them are forgiven their debt. Simon, do you even see what's right in front of you? Do you understand what's going on all around you? Here in the midst of a party, it may be hectic. It's kind of crazy. Simon, do you see this woman? Let's take a look at the next slide. I'm going to go dissect this a little bit. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life. That's code for prostitute. A woman in this town who's a prostitute learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. She came there with something that probably took her a long time to earn. With something so very valuable that even those richer at that party, can you believe she's doing that? What an expense! What a waste! What a lavishing of love. Simon, do you see this woman? With an alabaster box, jar of perfume. I go back and forth from King James in my thinking. As she stood behind him, at his feet, weeping. Humility. Weeping behind him. She began to wet his feet with her tears, and she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. Now, show of hands, moms or dads. Got parents in here? That means you had a kid. Anybody in here had a kid? Before your kid was old enough to tell you to kiss my foot, didn't you like doing it? They're so cute. Just wait. Just wait. You'll wash them first, maybe. Right after their bath, you just kiss those little hands. Also this last week, I'm wearing sandals a couple of days. And for some reason, wearing these Kings, these particular, I wear them all the time. But I noticed, man, my feet stink. I wasn't wearing socks with them, and I don't know, must have picked up something out there. And I thought, term of endearment, I kissed my daughter's feet, my wife, said, when I'm all clean, and something maybe sitting on the couch barefoot, she'd come by and she may at least touch him. I thought, I bet I couldn't even get her to touch him today. Jesus wore sandals. His feet had not yet been washed, which was customary to have happened. And she kissed his feet. Next, when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to him, immediate downgrade, if this man were even a prophet. Many are talking, rumblings, that he is the Messiah. He's the one. If he were even a prophet, one who could see. That's what it is, a seer, right? If he were even as bright as to see what's right in front of him, he would know that this woman who is touching him, that's what he says, this woman who is touching him is a prostitute. What a downgrade. Some are saying he's the Messiah. If he were even able to see with spiritual eyes, or maybe even just with natural eyes, he would know what manner of woman this were, and who was touching him, and that she's a sinner. Slide. Two people He gives a sermon. We've talked about it. Two people owe. Neither can pay. Both forgiven. Which one loves the most? Slide. I suppose the one who's forgiven the most. Very wise, very smart. You're smart, Simon. Good thing. Then he turned towards the woman and said to Simon, do you see the evidence of her love? Lavishing, unhindered, unrestrained love. She feels forgiven. She feels the weight that she has been carrying, the weight of her sin on her shoulders. She walked in, the heaviest woman in the room. She walked out the big loser, the biggest loser. She lost the weight of all of her sins because she met the one who could forgive her debt. But he looks at Simon and says, do you even see this woman? Do you not see the evidence of forgiveness that's taken place? The party's on. The party's on. This party's getting fun. This party's getting fun. He's pointing out, you may be forgiven a little bit, Simon, but you haven't understood the depth of forgiveness that this lady has come to. Slide. Simon, do you see what's right in front of you? The problem is that we have filters, just like Simon. We fail to see what's really going on in people's lives all around us, right in front of our eyes. We close the door on people because we fear them or because we're prejudiced of them, or I'm just too busy. The media, feeds into the fear. Everybody's doing bad things, chaos everywhere, and we're afraid to open our doors. We look at our neighbors, it's scary. They'll reject us, they'll refuse us, or worse yet, they'll kill us. So rather than loving our neighbor, we'll go to another town and do a soup kitchen. We'll go across the world and do a mission. No problem with that. I want to hear about that mission. We will next week, I think. But when we go to our neighbors, when we move them from stranger to acquaintance and with block parties, move them into having a relationship. Understand, because at parties people talk. Loose lips, sink ships. I don't know what they're drinking at your parties, but I may snuggle right over next to one that brought their own bottle to our party. Do you see the one right in front of you? Do you understand what's going on in their lives? We look at our neighbors and they scare us. The other thing is, my favorite is just the busyness. It's an interruption. What do you do about interruptions? Well, I'm a really busy man. God knows that. I'm busy in God's work. And church work and good stuff, and God understands that I can't, I'm hearing impaired anyway, and those crowds bother me and stuff, and God understands if the pastor doesn't like interruptions. But what about all the rest of you? Well, I don't know that he excuses the pastor so much, because Jesus dealt with interruptions all the time. I want you to go home, Dad. I'm not going to read this passage to you. I have it planned, and it's quite long. But you go home and read Luke 8:40 through the rest of the chapter. But I want to sum it up for you real quick here. Jesus is doing good stuff. That's pretty much a sum up right there. Jesus is doing good stuff. He's healing people directly in front of him while he gets a tap on the shoulder. Excuse me. I had to laugh this Friday at the family fellowship after VBS. The lady that has 9 natural children and 2 foster children, one of her children, she's making the balloons and she's talking to the adults, and one of the children says, excuse me, And the mother immediately stops. Oh, excuse me, you didn't realize that I was talking to somebody else and you need to wait a moment? And that child just zipped it, you know. But Jesus is doing good stuff, healing people right in front. Excuse me. What is it? There's a more important thing for you to do. Go to a more important person than these masses, a religious leader's house, and heal his 12-year-old daughter, whose wife is hanging by a thread. Oh, well, let's leave the masses and go to somebody more important. Leader's house, a religious leader. I got to get in good with them. And Jesus accepted the interruption and started off towards the leader's house. When all of a sudden he was interrupted again. Who touched me? Jesus. There's all kinds of people here. People are pressed in on you so tightly. It could have been any of them. No. Who touched me? And a woman, again, acknowledges, I interrupted you. And your interruption will be rewarded. Now, you know the story. This woman had an issue for 12 years. A lot of you have issues. Not me, but a lot of you have issues. This woman had an issue for 12 years. An issue that cost her all of her money. Consumed all of her time. Kept her from being able to be in any of the public gatherings, the parties. But she pressed through that day and thought, if I could just touch the hem of his garment. While that interruption was taking place. Excuse me. What is it? Don't bother the master. The little girl is dead. Jesus says, excuse me. I'm coming to your house. I'm going to raise her from the dead. Jesus knew how to handle interruptions. Amen?
Amen.
Now, I'll tell you, I'm the pastor. And interruptions, well, quite frankly, they're just interrupting. You know, I plan on reading another good book. I plan on putting a little more time into study. I plan on, working through some of those deep theological concepts that if I can get you to understand, you'll understand another deep theological concept. I cannot remember a person I've ever worked with in 20 years in the ministry that I haven't at some point or another told them, it doesn't matter how much you know. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
I've delivered some messages that had less preparation. But fortunately, you people are very loving. You know that I love you. And I invest myself in you. If you have a toilet that's leaking, I can fix it. You can call me up to come fix your toilet. If you have an air conditioning issue, I can come do that. I'll still get the sermon prepared. Let's do life together. Let's continue to serve one another. If the following of the great commandment to love your neighbor is followed in our life, will it really make any difference? Will it really change us? Yes. Are people going to come to know Jesus because we're at their party? Because we're not too busy? Because our lives can be interrupted. Let me tell you one of the greatest things I see about neighboring. And that's from a guy that's been a Christian now for quite a number of years. I, like JJ, accepted Christ as a young adult and didn't follow Christ before and all that. So, I'm 100%. I really want to get in there. But now, I've been walking with the Lord for a long, long time. Been in full-time ministry for a long portion of that time. Who do you think my friends are? You all. other churches I've been at, anyone who will stand up and proclaim that they're a Christian, immediately we're poor and they're a friend. One of the things the art of neighboring does is an antidote for the Christian bubble. I don't expect everybody at a block party to think like I think. I don't expect them to have all of the same views, but I want to spend time with them. I want to get to know them. I want to learn to love them. But you have to do it with the right motives. We share what we love. We're passionate about it. And therefore, when we get to know them and love them, we will want to share with them our love for our Lord. But you got to do it with the right motives. You can't have them as projects. Anyone that comes to this party that's not yet a Christian is a project. They're a potential project. If I get the chance, I'm going to slide in there. A slide ball, hook there, and they're going to get hooked in, and I'm going to pull it, and man, I got a big one on the line, and they're going to get saved. And they're going to get in my bubble with me the rest of my life. No. They're a potential friend. They're a potential person that you can come to love. And when you love them, and if they return that love for you, then they are a potential Christian. Ulterior motives, wrong. Eternal motivation, not so wrong. I want to love you. As long as the Lord put our neighbors together, as long as you're around me, I want to love you. Motivation. I want to love you and hope and pray that you will come to know and love my Savior, my Master, as I have. How you party matters. Slide. It is a way to intentionally help us to move, to get to know our neighbor, to move from stranger to acquaintance, to block parties, to relationships. People talk at parties. Get them one-on-one in your house and they never say a word. Get a whole group around you. Slide. Galatians 5:14. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command. What if he meant what he said? What if Jesus was smart enough to know that if we loved our literal neighbors, that they might call upon him, and he would prove to them that he is not far from them.
Amen.
And that they might come to love him and spend eternal life with you and I. What if Jesus knew what he was talking about? What a concept. What if we did what he commanded? It doesn't say suggestion. What's the greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God, with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. I follow this command. I'll take this as a suggestion. Half-hearted. What if we obeyed the command? Do you think it might bring about the harvest that he intends? Amen. Let our musicians come at this time. Let's have a hymn of invitation. I just invite you. Just do business with the Lord. You might want to come up around these altars. You may want myself or someone else pray, or you may just want to come up here and pray. Lord, am I taking serious what you have narrowed down this entire book to the two greatest things that I should be your literal neighbor? I should be loving if I truly love you with all my heart and mind. Stand with me if you will. I need to spend some time with the Lord this morning around these altars. I invite you.